So I'm super happy to have with me today John Arn from TechTape, also a property manager. So it's a huge welcome to you, John. We didn't actually meet in Miami at the Book Direct show. I think we sort of passed
Yes.
in the hallways and corridors or whatever and around and about, but we didn't meet until Barcelona a couple of weeks ago, and we had a good conversation. And having had that conversation with you, I thought you would be great to come on the show and talk about tech and tech stacks and the pain points we all have as managers. But I wanted to thank you, first of all, for coming on and ask you to start off by just telling us how you came into the short-term rental business, because you haven't always been involved in it.
No, this is like my fourth or fifth career right now. But as everyone else in this industry has, I went to college and got a degree in short-term rentals. No, no,
I wish.
we all fell into this in one way or another. And so, very long story short, after kind of a regular career, I actually wanted to go out on my own and build my own business. And it was supposed to be a real estate development business. And so I had a real estate, couple properties that I was developing. And typically, when you're developing, cash is always flowing out until you sell. And so I wanted to invest in a real estate asset where there would be monthly positive cash flow. And so that's how I kind of stumbled onto this business. Initially, I had managers, but I couldn't find managers who would actually do the job the way I felt it needed to be done. And so little by little, I started sinking deeper and deeper and deeper into this industry. And that's the short version of the story.
So where are your properties?
My properties are in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Very nice.
And it's not a huge portfolio, but it's a pretty profitable portfolio. Um, 2 bedroom, 2 bath condos, and the way I got into revenue management was these condos were generating on average consistently over $200,000 US dollars gross on an annual basis. And everyone that I ran into who heard that was just like, you can't do that with a condo. Um, and so with that, I helped some of my local managers make more money. And then soon other folks asked me about revenue management in other markets. And that's kind of how I gradually got into that area as well.
Well, we're definitely going to come on to revenue management later on, because I've said in many of these episodes, and been very transparent, that in my years as a property manager, we never used any revenue management strategies at all. And so many times I tried to get into this and try to understand it, but had difficulty. And it was just in the last couple of years where much more data was available in Ontario, because up until 2017, 18, Airbnb hadn't really hit that part of the world, and most of our bookings were done direct, and I felt we didn't have the data. But anyway, if I was back there now, we would definitely be adopting some different practices. And as I said, we'll come back to that a little later, because I just want to talk about general tech at the moment. It's overwhelming. There is so much out there. And I know when I got to the end of my tenure as CEO of Cottage Link Rental Management, that I was becoming very confused, very overwhelmed. And I love the bright, shiny things. I'm the one, the vendors love. when I'm walking around the exhibition halls, they can see it in my eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a new bright shiny thing. I have to have it. But with so much available now, what actually makes an optimal tech stack for a property management company? Is there a formula somewhere that says you need this one, this one, this one, and this one, and they'll all nicely work together? I want this amazing answer.
I think you know the answer already. let me just preface this by saying it's very interesting because most real estate, you know, industries, multifamily, single family, hotels, whatnot, they're very slow to adopt technology. And it's very interesting because in the short-term rental industry, like you said, so many people are chasing the shiny new object, right? It's like, oh, wow, this technology can solve this and this technology can solve that. And so it's a very vibrant landscape with a lot of very innovative options that, the providers, the founders create. I think the problem is, unfortunately, everyone has built their short-term rental business their own way. And because everyone did that, every business is different and every business's needs are different. And so because you have two sides that are variable, right? The technology is all variable as well as the management is all variable. It's really there is no formula at this point. So what I would advocate for is really as simple as possible that fits your business at this point in time is really the optimum tech stack. I'm actually the opposite of you, Heather. The vendors don't like me because they know that I'm evaluating it, but I'm not going to jump on board, right? And so I'm trying to figure out what they're doing and what's going on. And so I would say there are lots of products that have overlapping features, and you might get one and then that feature that it includes might not work for your business, but something else might. And so do you add it on or do you not? And so it's really understanding your business needs first. And I have an approach to, like, a kind of a systematic approach to figuring out at least a core of your tech stack that has been successful for me and for some of my friends and colleagues and clients. But it really does have to be custom, not custom built, but custom suited to your business. And you have to understand your business needs.
So is there any software that every business should have?
Well, of course, PMS. I do not advocate using, spreadsheets or, other, at least not today, right?
Well, that's all we had. That's all we had to start with, really.
No, and at that point, that was really kind of how you managed it, right? And you can keep your calendar up to date. So I would say a PMS, again, that suits your business needs. I would say definitely revenue management software. Typically, the PMS has some channel integration. So if you're not trying to get on lots of different channels, you may not need a channel manager on top of the PMS. An operations tool to manage your cleaners and your maintenance. And then the one thing that I think lots of people overlook is how you internally communicate amongst your team members, whether it's Slack, some tool so that you're organizing and making sure information is not getting lost. I think that would be kind of the core fundamental pieces of tech that you would need.
We were working remote in our company since 2015, so it was almost a joy, if you like, when COVID came and all our competitors were just panicking to get people out into their homes and get them all set up, and just like, well, we've been working with Slack and with Ring Central, and we've been doing this for 5 years already. So it was very easy, but I completely agreed. Certainly that connection between all your team members, and of course, so many companies now have the remote team members. There's few, I think, where maybe in some of the destinations where there is still the office where people come and pick up a key and they come and say hello to people. But would you agree that the majority now are managing really remote workforces?
I think our industry, uses offshore or virtual assistants a lot more than many other, at least nascent industries. So most of the operators that I know have some level of remote workforce. Yeah, I would agree with that. And because of that, the internal team communication tools and how that all works is really critical. Using WhatsApp, it's nice, but it's just very difficult to use as a distributed team.
I think many of us here over this side of the Atlantic find WhatsApp a little bit more challenging than they do in Europe, because it's something that everybody seems to use, and I find that a little overwhelming. Just too many messages. Who are they coming from? How it all hangs together. I watched, as you probably did, Daniela Derin's
Yes.
presentation on WhatsApp for Business, and it was like it was an aha moment that I never knew you could do this with WhatsApp.
It's incredible what she's doing, and
Yeah,
I wish I could implement it, but because I have a distributed team, um, I just don't know how I would implement it unless I want it to be on, on my computer or, something like that. But anyway, but what she's
yeah,
doing
it
is
was.
amazing.
Yeah, I will put a link to, because in fact Damien and Gianpaolo have now released all the slides from the Book Direct show. So I will put a link to those slides so you can take a look at them. Okay, so there is no real one size fits all then. One stack that works for everybody. That's not going to happen. But what are most I mean, you talk to a lot of managers and people who are looking after short-term rentals. What do you find are the common pain points? What are the pain points that everybody appears to have in their tech growth?
There are some very specific and then some common or generalities. I think in terms of specific feature sets, right now, I don't think there's very good solutions for trust accounting and accounting. There are solutions, and I'm not saying they're not good, but it's an aspect within our industry where even when you use a tech, you typically need to hire a consultant to manage that tech, and then it actually starts becoming more expensive than just having a bookkeeper or just having an accountant do it. And then the business analytics side, a lot of the PMSs have a lot of data, but the data, for whatever reason, is not very accurate. It's off. And so I think those are two areas that I think could use some more development in terms of the technology. But the more general aspect, I would say, is the pain point is that there are two sides. There are either people who just settle with the technology that they have, and they just accept that it's not working for them because it's too painful to switch. Or there are people who pursue perfecting that, like, 2, 3, 4 features that they really want, get it, and then they break everything else that had been working for them. And it's true, because the two PMSs might have the same feature set, but the way it's implemented can work for one business and not, the next one might not. And so I think I see people either settling or breaking things because of their pain points. What specific issues they are, that changes. But that's really the pain point that I went through myself. I've switched PMSs more than 15 times. I did a lot of brain damage, and I was I was refusing to settle, and that's what brought me to this where I am now.
Well, how come you changed so many times?
Because I kept on trying to find, okay, now this is working. Now I want a solution for this. And then, I would find it, and then the messaging would be all off because it doesn't function the way I was accustomed to. And now I want a mobile app so that I can control everything. So, and I kept on, I thought that the perfect solution was out there. And this is about, 6, 7 years ago. And to this day, eventually, we may get closer to a perfect solution, but as of now and within the next 2, 3 years, I don't see that happening.
You make a great point there. Everybody's out there looking for that perfect solution, because you're investing a lot of money into a property management software. There's a lot of money and a lot of time. And every so often I will recall the time in our company that we did go for all the bells and whistles, and we thought it was the perfect solution, and we got right the way through to launching it. And within 2 weeks, we just rolled back to what we originally had, which was our homegrown system, because our homegrown system was so much better.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of time. We lost a lot of dollars on that one. And then we ultimately did go on and find another one. It was a very simple software that served our purpose. But I think the last 4 or 5 years before we sold the business, we were doing demos every month or so, sometimes doing the demos 2 or 3 times, and it was all very exciting, but we just never got to, pulling the lever and saying, we're actually going to go for this. Because there is nothing out there that is going to give you absolutely everything that you want. And even if you want, a dozen simple things, it's likely that 1 or 2 of them won't be there. And I know the whole trust accounting issue is high on everybody's agendas. You want that to be built in, and that is a tough one. So choosing, let's stay on this topic of property management systems, because it's a really laborious process. As I said, you've done it many times. I did so many demos. So choosing a new system is it's open to errors of judgment, and it's definitely open to falling into the bells and whistles trap. And I would definitely say, at the risk of the ire of the vendors, don't just go to a conference and talk to the salespeople and go for it after that. You've got to sit back in your office with the people that matter to you to go through the demos and do it in detail, because you can, so easy to fall into the bells and whistles trap. So how would you advise somebody who's thinking, I really need to take the next step and either change my property management software or go from what I've been doing on my own, maybe with a homegrown system, into something that's customized?
Yeah, so I actually do have a framework that people can use generally to guide the process. So the first and most important point, and I'll preface this by saying I am tech neutral. So I'm not, this one PMS is better than another. Again, because one could be, great for one person and one could be terrible for another. The same thing can be terrible for another. But the first step is not to start asking around for recommendations from people that you trust and just saying, hey, what are you using? That's great, and it may work really well for them, but that does not mean that it's going to work well for you. So I would not go through, asking 10 friends and then whichever one pops up the most and use that. That's not the way to do it.
I see this on Facebook groups all the time.
I do all the time, and I respond saying,
I want to change my software, and everybody jumps in with something different.
Exactly. So the process that I've developed, again, through the 15 shifts that I've done, the first filter is identify for yourself the channels that you absolutely need to be on, and make sure that whichever PMS that you're selecting has a tight integration with those channels that you need to be on. If it's not on it right now, don't trust them saying, oh, it's Q2 of, never trust the roadmap. So it just has to have that tight integration at that point in time. That will, if you're looking for channels outside of Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, Expedia, that will really filter down what you need or what you need to be looking at. Mm-hmm. So once you've done that, then sit back and identify the top 3 or 4 features that are absolute must-have for your business, and really focus on those 3-4 features. And that's what you're demoing for. You're demoing for the things that your business needs, and then you're comparing how they differ between the different systems. And then expect every other feature to be horrible for you. You might be pleasantly surprised and it might work for you, but just go into it knowing that all the other bells and whistles that, oh, and if you act now, you'll also get features, C, D, E, F, and G. Just expect those to be horrible and just say, can I live with those features being horrible? You're managing your own expectations and making sure that you're getting the software that absolutely meets your needs. And like I said, don't trust, oh, that feature is in the roadmap. That's a way for a sales guy to get his commission. That's not a way to select software. And then the last thing, and this is very important, the new company will always say, okay, on such and such date, that will be the transition date, and you will turn your old software off, and we will turn everything on, and everything will be hunky-dory. It never will be. And so what you have to do is basically it's a ramp on and ramp off strategy. You test a couple features at a time. You don't let them turn the old one off, and make sure that you and your team are all hands on deck during that period of transition, and know that things are going to fall apart and you're going to have to manually fix things as you're transitioning.
Those are such great points. Really, really good points. I love the idea of just expecting the add-ons and the extras to be horrible.
Yeah, because I've been through it so many times.
But the thing is, it's often that those are the ones that draw you in, because everybody's probably doing the same for those main things you want. And then you've got, oh, they do this and they do that, and this is all going to be perfect. So I think that's a great way of approaching it, to say, okay, if these things work, well, that's all well and good, but let's expect them not to be great.
Yes. I'm all for managing expectations, both of guests and for myself and my team. And so just go in expecting horrible. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anywhere near the experience that you do of all these transitions. I can't imagine it, because I know the pain that we went through when we did not the last one, but the previous one. And it was horrible, sleepless nights. And then, of course, when they did press the button and everything rolled over, and then we had crickets for 3 days, not a single inquiry. And of course, we'd chosen exactly the wrong time of year to do it as well. We started looking for our software, and I think this is an important one. We started looking for our software at the end of a season. So it's all nice and quiet. It's the end of the season. Let's start looking. But the problem with that was by the time we'd gone through the onboarding and implementation phase and got to the launch, it was just the beginning of a new season.
Right.
And it's going to take 6 months at least. And yeah, if my advice would be, if you're going to start looking at new software, look at it at the beginning of the season, so you can start putting it in place when you're quiet.
Exactly. One comment I just want to have on this whole topic is the problem and issues that the pain point of transitioning. It's very predictable. It's just everyone does it once or twice, and so everyone is making the same mistake over and over again in a distributed way, right? And so, but the knowledge and the process is there, and so if you can help manage expectations on that process, it actually shouldn't be as it is painful, but it shouldn't be as painful as most people have it, because it's their first time.
So what are those expectations that you should have?
Like I said, you mentioned about like the timing, right? I mentioned that it's not like we're going to flip this off and turn it on, right? Because that's what everyone runs into, right? And then multiple things fall apart at the same time, and you're like, and you've been told everything's going to be exactly the same, right? And so and you also need to. This is very important. You need to actually have a data backup before you start, because most of your historic data is not going to transfer. So you have to take it upon yourself to make sure you have access to your historic data. But these are all things that are predictable, if you've run into the pain point out once or twice or 15 times.
Yeah, I would never have wanted to run into it more than once, let alone 15. Okay, that's some really good advice. I want to move on to revenue management now because, as I said, this is something that we should have implemented so many years ago. And I've spoken to so many people on this podcast where I've mentioned it to them. Andrew McConnell, for one. Andrew comes onto the podcast once or twice a year, and just about every time that he did that, he told me, "You are leaving money on the table."
Yes.
And I would say, "Hey, he would come on in January because Andrew is my very first guest of the year, and we talk about what's happened in the previous year and what's coming. And I would say, "Hey, we are just fully booked for the summer." He said, "That is not a good thing to happen."
Yes.
And I'm thinking, yes, it is. Our owners are happy. I said, no. You've just left so much money on the table. It took me a long time to really appreciate that it wasn't necessarily a good thing to be fully booked 6 months in advance.
Yes. So
tell me about why we should have done this, and any small company out there that's perhaps thinking about this now, why should they be taking it really seriously?
Right. So before, in the beginning of the podcast, you said you didn't have a revenue management strategy. You actually did have a strategy.
Set it and forget it.
Well, no, you had your seasonal peaks, right? You had your weekday, weekend. You knew your market, right? And so,
oh yes,
without the not having the data, you still had a strategy. You just had to manually implement it, and because of that, it was very limited. But you did have a strategy. Otherwise, you would have one flat price all across the year and just waited for bookings to come in. Yeah. So you did have a strategy, and you knew your
market. That makes me feel better.
No, you definitely did, and you knew your market inside and out in terms of the trends, the overall trends that you anticipate, right? So that's the foundation of a strategy: understanding your market and knowing when to go up, when to go down, and adjusting. Now we have dynamic pricing software, which ingests a lot more data and information and helps you refine and implement that strategy at a much higher level. And so, tools like Price Labs, Wheelhouse, Beyond, those are tools. And when you implement it, most people will see a bump in their revenue because it's being more responsive to the market. But there are still tools, and my analogy is those are like F1 Formula race cars, right? But you still need a driver if you want to win the Grand Prix, right? So those tools help and make it a lot easier to get the data and be responsive. And then on top of that, if you add a revenue manager who's actually using the tool, driving that car, that's how you actually win the race, right? And I know over the past 2 years, we've had, an amazing boom in our market, in our industry. And so, many managers are like, oh my God, I'm 30% higher than last year. This is amazing. Well, there are markets, where people were saying that, and other folks were 70, 80, 90% higher. And so you were leaving a lot of money on the table. And so now we're getting to a point where there's a software, and revenue management as a discipline is starting to, as a discipline within the short-term rental industry, is starting to formulate. I think Emily Patillo and Jordan Locke and some other folks are, Sarah Franzen, are like trying or have already started an organization for revenue managers in the short-term rental industry. And so that's kind of happening so that it becomes a formal discipline. But really, I would say if you're not taking revenue management seriously, you're not only doing you and your business a disservice, you're doing your owners a huge disservice because you are not maximizing their asset. So I think it's, every manager really needs to take revenue management as a serious part of their business.
So where do they start? How does a small manager start looking at choosing what's right for their business? Because you've pointed out that the software is one thing, but actually having somebody to drive that software is another, and that begins to add to the expense when the smaller property managers are on a budget.
So the first step is to get on a reputable software, right? So buy the car, right? You have to have the car to start driving it. And depending on how much involvement you want, different tools have different, can produce different results. So again, I'm tech agnostic. Any one of those tools that I mentioned, and I'm sure there are others, are fine. When you hire a revenue manager, and by bringing on that tool, you should anticipate making more money, and not as that tool as an expense, but as a revenue generator, right? And then when you bring on a revenue manager, that revenue manager should also be making you more money than if you were just using the software. So it's not an expense. And if that's not happening, then you should be finding a different driver, a different revenue manager. And the revenue management also has to be aligned with your market, but also your risk profile, right? If you really want to try to maximize your revenue, you might take some more risky decisions, and at the end of the year, make more money. If you want to kind of, straight out, like kind of consistent 3 or 4 months booking in advance, then they're probably not going to make you as, that much more money, right? And those are the kind of things that you need to understand as you're hiring. But a revenue management software and a revenue manager should be a value add to your to your business, and not an expense. And then on top of that, it should save you and your team a lot of time. So those are the ways that a revenue manager should be adding value to your business.
It's interesting, a couple of things that you said, because I don't know if I think you have been following the 10 Mistakes series that Brooke Phelps has
I'm still waiting for Brooke to ask me. No, I'm kidding.
And then there's a couple of them that have come up, over and over again. And one of them is, and I think I wrote that in my list, was one of my mistakes was going for the lower cost option and missing out on the benefits I would have got to invest in something that was really going to work to push the business forward. And I think, this is probably what we did with revenue management. We did adopt some practices, we'll raise the rate for the last week of July and the first week of August because we know they're so popular. As you said, we did have a strategy. It was a very basic strategy. But we did that probably to the detriment of actually maximizing our potential if we'd actually bought into revenue management and hired somebody to do it properly for us. The other question that and I can't remember, I think it was Steve Schwab on this morning's list, and he made a mention of something I hadn't seen before. And that was, never be afraid of asking the basic questions, and never be afraid of saying that you don't have the knowledge because you fear being judged. And I think that's what I used to do. So I'm asking you this now because I don't care about being judged anymore, about the difference between revenue management and data. I see companies like Transparent and AirDNA and Key Data on the one hand, and then there's Wheelhouse and Beyond and Price Labs and Rented.com. And what are the difference? What are the differences?
Yes.
Because you need the data to operate the revenue management side of it. So do you have to bring in that data stuff as well?
I will answer that. Can I just make one comment on the previous point that you made?
Yeah.
You said you had, bringing in revenue management, and you probably could have, increased your revenue. When you're going to sell a company, Your company is based on the revenue that it's generated, or that's multiples of that revenue,
Hmm.
right? And so that's another area where if you're thinking about exiting within the next, 1, 2, 3 years, you should really be taking your revenue management very seriously, because on the multiples, it could actually mean, a substantial amount.
Hmm.
Um, so just it's kind of a holistic picture overall. On the data, you bring up a very, very good point, and this is something that I've been kind of pushing in my talks and everything. Our industry loves technology, and so everyone talks about we're data driven. We're data driven. We have transparent. We have key data. We mash it together. All the data is very important, but data can only be used at this point to inform our decisions. So it can be as much data that you can actually digest and understand and make informed decisions on, and not the more data that you have, the better it is. So
Hmm.
what I would say is, tools like Price Labs, Wheelhouse Beyond ingests data to kind of not hide, but to make the systems work, right? So there is a lot of data in those tools in and of themselves, but they're primarily there to help make sure that those tools are functioning to respond to demand patterns and whatnot. And that's good for that tool. Now, if you start going to air DNA, key data, transparent, and those types of data providers, they have a vast array of different types of data. And so now within there, you could get more refined information on your marketplace, or, your comps and whatnot. And so it really comes down to what information can you ingest to make informed decisions. And actually, if you have too much data, I think there are many studies that show that it hinders, or you end up making worse decisions because you get paralyzed, right? If you
Yeah,
don't have the ability, yeah.
I've got an analogy here. Well, it's not an analogy; it's a sort of comparison. I was in Berlin a couple of weeks ago and went to a restaurant, and they brought out the menu, which was a book,
Mhm.
and there were probably 30 pages in this book, and I was paralyzed. We didn't eat there because I couldn't make my mind up. I think that's sort of what you're, as really an analogy for what you're talking about here.
Right. So now, if you have the technology or the team, data scientists, to ingest it and be able to process it to inform your decisions, that's great. But most property managers don't have a data science team. And so that's where then you kind of want to kind of adjust the data to a level that you can digest and make informed decisions on. That's my point of view.
I was in Berlin in a restaurant with my data scientist daughter. I should have asked her that question, shouldn't I? What should I choose from this menu?
Please digest it for me and give me the top three, KPIs, so
Yes,
that you could choose which dish to order.
exactly, exactly. Um, okay, so really, choice of revenue managers is just comes. I mean, they all. I mean, I've spoken to all of them, and I love the guys that run every one of them, from Price Labs and Beyond and Wheelhouse. They're just amazing teams.
Yep.
So when it comes down to choice, is there a formula for choosing the right one, or do you just go with like when I used to go for a realtor to sell one of my houses,
Mhm.
I'd go for the one with the nicest picture.
Right. I would not necessarily choose a tool like this based on the nicest picture as the only criteria. Although the nice pictures can help you ingest the data, so that can be an important factor. Um, of those three tools, I think each has their pros and cons. And I share this directly with Andrew Kitchell, Anurag, and Richie, and Ryan Saylor. Um, but I think beyond pricing makes it as simple as they make it so that it's as simple as possible to kind of set it and forget it and like trust the algorithm. To someone like myself, that's challenging because being able to pull different levers when different things happen is something that is important to me. But there are many managers who want to just literally set it and forget it and do better than what they were doing before. Um, and I think that beyond makes it really easy to do that and achieve great results. Price Labs has a lot of a lot of levers that you can pull, tweak, and so it actually gets very confusing. And sometimes if you have two different settings, it could override each other, and you don't get the results that you want. But it does give you a lot of levers. So if you know how to use it, it gives you a lot of a lot that you can. It's like gymnastics, right? And Wheelhouse is similar in that way. No, Price Labs is also integrated with a lot of different platforms, and that makes it so that you can, pretty much use it anywhere. Wheelhouse has a lot of levers as well, and Wheelhouse's, I think, strong point is the visualization of the data. It makes it really easy to digest what's going on and compare your performance to the market. And so again, Switzerland, neutral. I have used and I use all three of those tools, depending on the situation. But there is no formula for which one you choose. But I think I kind of highlighted some of the pros and cons of the three big ones.
I know if I was back in charge, I don't know how I would go about choosing, because certainly from the basis of a property manager who's not used to this and who is just going to the conference and just going to the booths, I love them all.
Yes.
Maybe that's why I never did it. That's why we had Beyond was our sponsor of the podcast for two seasons, and I learnt a lot. In fact, because we were doing very short pieces in the middle of each episode, which was a question. What questions are you asked by your clients when they're coming to you to look for solutions? And I think it was Ryan Saylor who was on for each one of those 10 questions, and that really opened my eyes to what was available. And then I just love how Price Labs market themselves, and I spent ages talking to Andrew in Barcelona, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm not the one. I'm going to be Switzerland too. But I think Deborah Labby has probably talked to all three of them in her Tech-Explained series. So I'll make sure there's a link to that people can go and take a look at. Anybody interested in Beyond, we still have a good interview with one of Beyond's clients on vacation rental formula. So I'll put a link to that as well. If you are out there looking for revenue management options. So, John, where do you think? I mean, everything's moving so fast, so fast with AI and just what's out there in the changing world of technology now. Where do you see the tech side of this industry going in the future?
Yes, yes. AI is the hot topic right now, not just in our industry, across every industry. But taking a step back, Francois Guello from Enzo and I just in Barcelona had a presentation on kind of the fragmented tech stack or technology landscape in our industry. And so there are like multiple ways that it can go. So one is consolidation through acquisition. So big companies buying up smaller companies. And a lot of people wish for that so that you would have one product that does everything. But I say be careful what you wish for, because then your options get limited, and you basically end up with Microsoft and Google as your only option for your top software tech stack. The other is marketplaces within the PMSs that they've made partnerships or whatnot, and there's displayed within the PMS. But that basically makes the PMS kind of the arbiter of what is and is not your option. There's a white labeling where you can kind of bring things together and use other people's technology in a very integrated way, again, the PMS becomes the arbiter. Um, and then for the time being, the one that I'm working with and I'm excited about is the semi-custom build using no-code or low-code solutions like the Zapiers and things of that nature. And what that enables you to do is to kind of cherry pick the best solutions that works for your business. And then not that everything is possible, but you should be able to kind of semi-customize workflows that sit in parallel to your tech stack that is working for most of your needs. And so I think within the next 2 to 3 years, I think it'll be somewhere between consolidation is going to happen, right? I mean, private equity, that's going to happen. But I think there's going to be a very interesting aspect of the semi-custom build. And the reason why I'm even more excited about it is because AI makes these no-code, low-code options even more accessible to normal human beings, and you don't have to be a developer in order to access it. So I do see this area growing as well. I don't know if it's going to take over, but I think it's a way for the fragmentation to kind of settle down a little bit while still having a lot of vibrant options for managers to choose from.
Well, I think that whatever happens, the proliferation of software is not going to slow down any. So for any of you who are planning on going to VRMA International in Orlando, or even to the DARM conference in
December, I think, right?
Nashville, in December, you will get to see all of these options out there, because all the major players are going to certainly be at Orlando, and a lot of them are going to be in Nashville. So get in touch with John if you're not sure what you should be doing. And on that topic, John, just to wrap up, tell us about TechTape and what you actually do.
Yeah, so TechTape, we have 3 core services. One is we provide revenue management services. So we use, Wheelhouse, Price Labs, Beyond, all the tools that you have available. And so we are the drivers of these software. We build and maintain semi-customized solutions for clients to solve their very specific integration tech needs within their tech solution. And then we do provide some, like I call it owner's rep services for folks who are transitioning between PMSs, because again, we can make it a less painful process. Yeah. So those are the 3 tech-related services that we provide, and it's all based on, as a property manager, experience and the pain points that we've experienced and have been able to solve.
I think if I was still in property management, I would be reaching out to you, because making those choices can be very, very expensive, particularly if you make the wrong ones.
Yes.
So I think having somebody alongside to help you make those decisions is a really good thing. So yes, get in touch with John. There will be information on the show notes as to how to get in touch with him, and I am sure he will do a good job for you. John, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. I have to say that the whole, when I was in the business of running a property management company, I was sort of up there looking at strategy and not really getting involved in the detail of how it all happened. And to make a confession, for the last 4 years of being in the business, I don't think I ever logged in to our property management software.
That's good. That's a good thing for you.
I did not. Yeah, I didn't know how to use it, but everybody else seemed to manage it, and all the reservations went through, and everything was pretty darn cool. But yes, this sort of conversation would probably have not been easy for me a few years ago. Now I'm out of it. It just seems to be like a walk in the park.
Of course.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope everybody's got some really good information from John, and that you'll get in touch with him if you have any questions. I hope that's okay. I'm just
Yes,
throwing
of
that out
course.
there.
LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me if you don't have my info. But thank you, Heather. This was amazing. A lot of fun, and I look forward to meeting up with you at another conference.
Oh, I'm sure we will. I'm sure. Well, it'll be Orlando and then Nashville for me.
Yep.
So I'll see you there.
All right.